So some really good news came out for the country in the form of the July jobs report. Over 500,000 jobs have been added during the month of July, and that's just objectively great news. Super happy to hear it. The expectation was 250,000, so double what even the White House was expecting to happen. And later in the show, we have a segment about the Fox News response to this, and then Fox News pundits, or at least conservative pundits' predictions about the jobs report and how they were just horribly wrong. And so that'll be super interesting to look at. But for this segment, we're going to be looking at Biden announcing this news, kind of pumping himself up, as well as taking a little bit of a jab at Donald Trump, which will be interesting to see. But then I want to make a number of different points about, first of all, the news itself being good. Also, how the Democrats should handle generally branding themselves in regard to economics and in regard to news like this. So let's go ahead and take a look at Biden announcing the July jobs report numbers.
Almost 10 million jobs since I took office. That's the fastest job growth in history. Today, we also match the lowest unemployment rate in America in the last 50 years, 3.5%. Yes, 3.5%. Today, there are more people working in America than before the pandemic began. In fact, there are more people working in America than any point in American history. You know, what we're also seeing is something that just a few years ago, many experts said was literally impossible: the revitalization of American manufacturing. Since I took office, we've created 642,000 American manufacturing jobs in America. We've seen the biggest and the fastest job recovery in American manufacturing history since the 50s. And some people may have given up on American manufacturing, but the American people didn't, and I know I never did. That's why I made it, "Make it in America," that phrase, "Make it in America," the cornerstone of my economic plan. And today's report proves "Make it in America" isn't just a slogan, it's my administration. It's a reality. I've also made it a priority to bring down the federal deficit. After watching my predecessor every single year increase the debt, the federal deficit, every year for the 4 years he was in office, I said no more. The days of exploding federal deficits are over, and I've kept my word. Just take a look at the facts. The deficit is down a record of $1.7 trillion this year. That's right, $1.7 trillion with a T. And that's on top of $350 billion reduction in the deficit my first year in office.
Okay, so at the end there, when addressing his reduction of the deficit, taking a jab at Trump, saying that he blew up the deficit, which he did, largely in the form of giving money to the wealthiest Americans. And Biden has reduced it this year in a very significant fashion. So that's a good win under his belt. So up front, there's 2 points with big caveats in between them. The first point is great news, over 500,000, double the expected numbers of job growth. That's amazing. Unemployment is incredibly low compared to most times in American history, and really, really good news on that front. Okay, setting that aside, boom. Now, that's not even saying, is this the Democrats doing? Is this whatever? No, I'm just saying good news regardless of what caused it. And then I have a big caveat to make, and then I have my second point, okay? Caveat is I'm not really making a claim about who rightfully should take credit for this. Who's doing is this? I think economics is so much more complicated than just the administration that's in power. There's so many things globally related. Obviously with the pandemic, that unprecedented kind of variables in place that we're still dealing with now. And I've explained that in segments debunking some of the people blaming particular people for high gas prices or inflation. You know, whenever they go after Biden for that, saying he clicked the high gas price button, you got to debunk it and explain this is a worldwide phenomenon people are dealing with right now. Inflation is higher in many other countries and developed countries because of the factors that were put in place, or I should say were kind of spun off and created because of the pandemic. And there's so much more than just who is in power right now. So I recognize that within the conversation, because when there's negative news and they want to blame it on Biden, I'm honest and I tell you it's not all Biden's fault and it's not all the Democrats' fault. When there's great news and they want to blame it on, people want to take credit for it, I'll tell you the same thing, if that's true. Now, if they pass a big government program and you're saying, give them the credit for that, absolutely, that's all they're doing, and you should absolutely applaud them for passing that. Okay. But within the conversation of Democrats branding themselves well, they have to do a better job of grabbing onto numbers like this and shoving it in everyone's faces. I'm going to do a lot of comparing to Trump in this segment because he was the master marketer. He, regardless of if he did something great or not, would make you think, make supporters of him think, and even a lot of people who were on the fence think that he was a master economist, that every single thing he touched turned to gold. And all of those ideas that people believed about him that weren't exactly correct or sometimes weren't correct at all. And so Biden is trying to do it here. I think there's an element of him literally not being capable of communicating effectively enough to do this. So that might just be too bad, so sad for anyone hoping the Democrats do better in the midterms. But if you had a better, more dynamic Democratic leader, and what I wish Biden could do, they would be promoting this like crazy. And every single person in America should know that he's had over 9 million jobs created under his administration, record low unemployment, which is pretty remarkable within the context of all the economic pain we experienced during COVID. Again, I'm not saying that's because Biden's a genius. No, there's so many other factors, but Biden needs to frame it that way if he wants to have better approval rating, if he wants to help the Democrats in the midterms. And in my mind, regardless of the reality of who is most to blame for good things that happen, we are aware that he's getting blamed for all the bad things within the economy. Definitely. So the only way you're going to balance the scale is to take credit for the good things. And that's what I pitch to a lot of conservatives, is like, just to see if they're consistent. You guys all said it was pretty much primarily Biden's fault that we had high gas prices. Now that we've seen almost 2 months of historically fast drops in gas prices, consistently dropping, I think almost 90 cents over the last couple months. Do you give him credit for that? Was Biden now magically creating gas prices, creating factors that are causing gas prices to go down? Now, if you're consistent, you can recognize that probably neither. He's probably not causing them to go way up, probably not causing them to go way down. And you can say the same thing about jobs. I think there are things, investments in the economy that have been made that probably do contribute, but it's not the sole factor. So there's some credit you can give to the Democrats, honestly and factually, I do believe, but definitely not, wholesale. But if Trump was in power right now and he had gained, that many jobs right after a devastating economic crisis and gotten back to record low unemployment and all of these things, he would be promoting the stink out of it, and allies of him would be promoting the stink out of it. So I think the Democrats should do a better job of doing that if they want to have a fighting chance in this midterm and in 2024. And again, on a factual level, if you say, okay, inflation, that's because the Democrats spent too much money, or that's because of Biden being a crazy socialist, then why is it that when you compare the United States inflation to other countries, it's not way higher? In many cases, it's lower than a lot of other countries that are somewhat comparable. So if that's Biden's fault, you would see some difference between countries who haven't done the things that you're saying the Biden administration has done or the Democrats have done. So if the Democrats can go out there and say, look, we know you're hurting. We know inflation is causing your wages to be less compared to the things that you're purchasing. You have less buying power. This is hurtful. Gas prices are harming you a lot. We recognize that, and we are trying with every little bone in our body to address those things. And also, what we have done is create within a already tough economy this many jobs and getting unemployment back to this number. And we're finally getting gas prices to drop in a significant fashion. That's a message I think people can buy into, even though they're still going to be upset with the current economic conditions.